This series of lectures is on leadership and motivation. Now, both of these topics, leadership and motivation, are complex topics and could be discussed and approached in many different ways. For the purposes of this series of lectures, we want to look at leadership as it relates to one person's actions influencing the behavior of others. Now, classically, if we were to look at leadership, we would be looking at the possibility of one of two things. One is we would be asking our group that we're leading to hold a position that we have, to stay the course, to execute the mission that we've been given. Another way to look at leadership, and one that is invoked when we think of the notion of leadership, is the idea of taking the mountain. This involves taking a group of people from a point that they're at now to another point, a higher point that is desirable for the group. And it's the leader's role to provide the leadership to get the group to the top of the mountain. This is how we would like to think of leadership in an organizational context when we speak of wanting our managers to be more leaders. We generally are talking about behaviors of our managers that are taking our group to levels where they haven't been before, breaking new ground, accelerating past trends, and so forth. So when we look at leadership in this series, we're going to look at the actions of managers or leaders that affect either holding a position, which is more of a traditional view, or taking the mountain, which is an aspired view that organizations have of their leaders. Well, what are some of the guiding principles then that we will be looking at as it relates to the leadership's role of holding the position or taking the mountain? Well, one way to look at the distinction between these two leadership roles is that holding the position is really about inducing behavior of the followers. Now, inducing behaviors involves the manipulation, you might say, of the environment of the employee or of the follower, such that the employee will respond to the stimulus of the environment in a direction that the leader desires for the behavior to be. In terms of taking the mountain, however, we're talking about inspiring behavior. This is a leadership role or a leadership effect in which the individual changes on the inside, has a new or a different inspiration, desires something that they didn't desire before, and this drives the behavior. So it's more of an inside-out effect as opposed to an outside-in. The leadership literature that organizational behavioralists study would classify these two kinds of leadership as either transactional or transformational. Transactional leadership depends on using extrinsic factors to affect the behavior of the follower. Extrinsic factors are simply those things that exist outside the individual in the individual's environment. On the other hand, transformational leadership involves intrinsic factors, which are influences on an individual's behavior that come from within the individual themselves. So that's the first major distinction we'd make between transactional and transformational leadership. Therefore, when we think of transactional leaders and what they do in order to influence their followers, we focus primarily on structural aspects of the organization, things such as job descriptions and reward systems and policies and procedures and even culture and various forms of control systems. In the transformational leadership role of leaders, we're looking more at interpersonal effects. This is where the leader actually affects the follower from a personal standpoint. It's changing the person, changing their desires, changing their wants. This is where motivation has typically been considered, and that is that the transformational leader is called upon to motivate the follower in certain ways. However, both transactional and transformational leadership roles do involve motivation, but very different models and theories of motivation, which we will cover in the sessions to follow. The content of this series of lectures includes session 1, which we're in now, which will be a critique of the movie Rudy. We will look at this movie from the standpoint of illustrating for us motivational concepts that we will later discuss in session 2, which will be examining the models of motivation that can inform us on actions that leaders can take to influence the behavior of their followers. Session 3 then will be a time in which we'll attempt to apply the model. You'll have an opportunity to do some exercises that will relate to application, and we'll take you through the more of the how to invoke the elements of the motivation model that we talk about in session 2. So we'll start with the movie Rudy. You've been asked to preview the movie or to view the movie, and to do it with a set of questions that can frame a critique for you about the movie that will point you to various motivational very motivational topics that are found in the movie. The movie basically is a classic movie that came out in the early 90s about a young man who fulfilled a dream to play football at Notre Dame. And the major point of this is that this behavior, this accomplishment of Rudy did occur against many odds. Now the question you might have is, why would we want to study this particular movie, the movie Rudy? Rudy was not noted as a leader, and so Rudy is not giving us a model of leadership, but the movie Rudy is giving us an opportunity to understand and to see many different aspects of motivation. One of the barriers to effective leadership are the myths and misconceptions associated with motivation. While motivation is a very often used term, many people feel and believe that they have an understanding of the concept of motivation. When we really look at motivation in a disciplined way, we'll find that many people have some misconceptions. They believe some things about motivation that are not proper, not correct, and when applied would result in results not desired. So if leaders are about influencing followers, the behavior of followers, and motivation is a major component of the process by which people choose behaviors, then it would be helpful for us to understand motivation in a very disciplined and detailed way, and we will use the movie of Rudy to introduce us to many of those topics. The first question that we'd like to answer from the movie is, who is the most motivated character in the movie? Well, I ask this often of my students, and their response is such that they believe it's a trick question. Well, it's not a trick question. It's a very fundamental question. For instance, was Rudy the most motivated student? Most people would say Rudy was not a very motivated student. There are many scenes early in the show of where Rudy was not paying attention in class and was not making good grades. In fact, did not make sufficient grades to go on to college. The second question we might ask, was Rudy the most motivated worker in the factory? Well, there was a scene early in the movie that after Rudy graduated that made a specific point, to the fact that Rudy was late to work again, and of course tardiness to work is an example of the lack of motivation to work. And so we easily can recognize that Rudy was not the most motivated worker in the factory. We might ask, was Rudy more motivated to get married than his girlfriend?